All right, hello everyone. Happy Travel Talk Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us. We will begin in just a few minutes. We're just gonna wait for everybody to log on, get situated, get comfortable. So in the meantime, as you already know, please feel free to let us know in the comments on Zoom and on Facebook where you are tuning in from. All right, we're just waiting for a few more people to join us. Welcome to everyone who's just joining. Marilyn from British Columbia. Oh my gosh, Deborah from New York City. Shauna from Austin, welcome. Hello. Hi, Larry from Virginia. Oh my gosh, thank you all so much for joining. All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. All right, here we go. Now, let's get the show on the road. All right, hi everyone, welcome. My name is Claudia and I work out of the EFGO Tours office in Boston. I am so excited to be joined by you today for this wonderful travel talk on Peru. If this is your first time joining us for a travel talk, welcome. We are happy to have you. And if you joined us in the past, welcome back and thank you for your continued support. Today's going to be a lot of fun, but before we get started, I want to set some expectations for this session. Now, first, this is a webinar, which means you will only be able to see and hear me, your host, and our special guest today. Your camera and audio will be off, so we won't be able to see you or hear you, but of course, we always want to hear from you. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please submit those via the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And for anyone joining on Facebook, welcome. Feel free to write your questions in the comment section there. We'll have a Q&A session live at the end, so please make sure to submit your questions as well. All right. Now, with more than 10,000 years of history, Peru boasts so many natural and cultural treasures, fascinating people from all over the world. The country is most popular for the old ruins of Machu Picchu that date back all the way to the Inca Empire. However, Peru has plenty of more amazing things to do than hiking the famous Inca Trail uphill. Peru, known for its culinary quality, you have the chance to taste delicious Peruvian food, such as lomo saltado and ceviche. Throughout Peru, people are kind, helpful, and friendly, so you can always expect to receive a warm welcome wherever you go. Over the next hour, we will be virtually traveling around magical and very colorful Peru with our expert tour director, David. He's going to share his top must-see and must-visit places in Peru. Now, with that, it is my pleasure to introduce your host for today, expert tour director David, live from his home in Peru. David, thank you so very much for being here with us today. Now, before we get started, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Hola, Claudia. Hello, everybody. For me, it's a pleasure to join this webinar in which I will try to cover as much as I can of my beautiful country. As you said, my name is David Arce. I'm a tour director for over 10 years, and I've been working with Go Ahead for the last 5 years. So here I am to answer all your questions. So everybody, welcome to this webinar.
All right, thank you, David. Gracias. Now, before we share our top places to visit in Peru, let's first talk a little bit about Peru's geography. Now, Peru is located on the west coast of the South American continent, next to the Pacific Ocean. It is a unique, multicultural, and colorful destination, a country full of contrasts that come to light after discovering its diverse culture, history, geography, biodiversity, and gastronomy. From the coastal lands of the capital and the dunes of Ica, crossing the Andes mountain range up to the Peruvian Amazon. David, can you tell us a little bit more about its geographical features?
Yes, of course, Claudia. You well said it. Peru, it's a country of contrast. Somehow, when people travels across our country, it seems, that it's traveling through three different places. And this is because, as you said it, many people think that Peru is just a mountain or country, which let me tell you that is not correct, because what about if I tell you that 60% of our territory is in the jungle? So we have more Amazon rainforest than mountains or coast. But our biggest cities are in the coast. And if you move up to the Andes, you can discover amazing culture, amazing history. And of course, the Amazon rainforest gives you a different, perspective of this, as you said, multicultural country. So that's it. Peru is a country that seems to be a melting pot of cultures and a melting pot, of different kinds of geography.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, David. Now, before sharing our top places to visit in Peru, we got a pre-submitted question from Deborah, and she wants to know, what is the best time to go to Peru for good weather?
Sure. Hi, Deborah. I will say that anytime it's the best time to come to Peru. We basically have two seasons. We have a dry season for most of the year, and we have a rainy season for about 3 months, which are December, January, and February. But even though it's beautiful to travel around the country during the rainy time, because everything looks much greener, and the mountains and the Amazon rainforest get a different color during the rain. So anytime is a good time. So don't wait, just sign up and then come to South America.
Yes, exactly. So basically, any time is a good time to visit Peru. Now, the first place that we are visiting in Peru are the Nazca Lines. Now, for those of you who have never heard of the Nazca Lines, they are a collection of giant geoglyphs located in the Peruvian coastal plain, about 250 miles south of Lima, Peru. Now, David, can you tell us why it's worth visiting, and how can travelers get there with Go Ahead?
Well, our history goes back to even 4,000 years before Christ. Many people think that just the Incas were important, but let me tell you that we had a bunch of pre-Columbian or pre-Inca civilizations that were as important as the Incas, and one of those were the Nazcas. We're talking about of the first century after Christ. And to be able to get to this place, what we do in an optional excursion on our tours is to take a bus ride of 3.5 hours to a very little city called Pisco, from which we take the aircrafts to overfly this beautiful desert, which is actually the driest desert, in the continent, in which the Nazcas, around the year 300 after Christ, decided to design these beautiful figures. And I like what everybody thinks, because on the screen it looks tiny. These figures has miles of extension, so they're impossible to see from the ground. You could be literally standing in one of those and don't figure out that you're standing on the line. So you need to see it from the air, and that somehow makes people think, and how is that the Nazcas were able to design these enormous figures in the desert? And then is when it comes, all these hypotheses and theories about the aliens, that makes this place even more attractive for tourists. But definitely a place that you should not miss, because the experience is well worth it. Just a simple recommendation for those of you that perhaps have motion sickness or attempt to have motion sickness. The overflight to the Nazca Desert could be a little bit rough, because as you see, are very small aircrafts. And obviously, like if you are flying and the captain says, those of you on the left are going to see now the monkey. So then the aircraft is going to make a left turn for those on the left to see the monkey. But then it's time to the ones in the right side to see the monkey. So then the aircraft is going to do a right turn. So it could be a little bit rough, but definitely a place that you should not miss when you come to Peru.
Great. Well, a perfect unsolved mystery that is worth visiting. Now, after the Nazca Lines, we have Iquitos. David, why did this place make our top places to visit in Peru?
Wow, Iquitos is one of those places that remain for centuries as an oasis. Throughout the Peruvian history, the various governments we had, never created an access, to this beautiful site in the Amazon forest, which means that the only way to get to Iquitos is by air in most of the cases, or by canoes, but that's days of traveling on these rivers, no, from the closest points. But definitely, what makes Iquitos a very interesting place to visit is the little European influence that has, due to the rubber fever in the late 1800s and early 1900s, that brought a lot of French and English people to obviously, explode the Amazon. And as you see, for example, in some structures in downtown, we have an air of these French, styles in the construction of most of the houses, of course, combined with some Spanish, features, which is the biggest background we have in the country. Now, this is a picture in downtown Iquitos, and look at the kind of transportation. I know that in some parts of the world, this kind of transportation is called tuk-tuks, if I'm not wrong. But in Peru, we call them motor taxis. And this is the main way of transportation in the city. Let me tell you that it seems that there is more motor taxis than people in Iquitos. Just put it on that way. It's cheap. It's actually more comfortable to travel, in the city in this kind of transportation, because just imagine a place that is pretty much most of the time over 70s or 80s. Definitely, this is the best option.
All right, David. Now, before we continue, we actually got a question from Marjorie, and they're wondering if someone has a mobility issue, is this trip possible for them?
Hi, Mayuri. Well, definitely, I recommend that if somebody wants to add, this extension to the tour, or wanna come, to Iquitos, definitely needs to have some conditions. And this is because most of our tours and most of our excursions are into the jungle. Like, for example, the one that you're seeing here. It's the canopy walk. It's one of the main attractions in Iquitos, at least for everybody that signs up for these tours. Just imagine to be 30 feet over the ground at the canopy of these beautiful, trees, enjoying the wildlife, around. And look at, you have to walk across suspension bridges. So definitely it's not a place that for people that has some issues with mobility, right? So, or like, for example, look at this other picture, we have sometimes in between our main excursions, time for fishing, no? And so we look for little tributaries, little streams, that feed the Amazon River, looking for the piranhas. No, and so it's a very unique way of fishing because it's very rustic, I would say. And so it also, needs a certain mobility in order to move around these little canoes. Right? But a part of, the question, the Iquitos region is very interesting because after, little hikes into the jungle, you're able to get to amazing people like the Yaguas that you see on the picture, which are tribes that have survived, the modernity over the last century. And actually they decided not to live in this way because they consider that it's part of their tradition and part of the respect they have to the mother forest. And the picture you see in there, it's normally the kind of clothing they wear in very important occasions because pretty much most of the time they're half naked. Yeah, and the man you see there standing in the middle holding what it looks like a cane, that's a blowgun. And when we go to visit them, they try to show us, how they survive in the jungle by hunting monkeys, for example, with the blowguns, and how they use the venom of some frogs or some animals, some insects in the darts to be able to hunt animals, at some distance from the ground. So it's just amazing, to visit these people. And of course, whenever we go to a different place in Peru, we have to talk about the food because you know that Peru is one of the main culinary destinations in the world. So when you go to the jungle, of course, we are not expecting to have a ceviche or a lomo saltado. We have to try the local food. And for example, from left to right, if you see these kind of skewers, they're made out of a worm that lives on the banana tree, in the banana tree. And you can either have it fried or just raw. No, they're called suri, and everybody says that tastes like chicken, but I think that every new thing tastes like chicken. So I would say that they have a very unique flavor. The bananas, of course, which is part of our daily meals, and we have different kind of tubers and products that come from the rivers every day.
Well, the food in that market looks delicious. And David, I have to say, to this day, I still believe Peru has one of the best cuisines in the world. Now, on to Lake Titicaca. David, what is so special about Lake Titicaca?
Well, Lake Titicaca, I will start saying that it's considered as one of the highest navigable lakes in the world. Just imagine that not long ago, until the 1970s, 1980s, we got big steamers. Most of them came from Europe that worked, transporting people across the lake in between Bolivia and Peru, because that was the only way of transportation back then. No, but Lake Titicaca, it's also beautiful because to be able to get here from Cusco, we take a bus ride of 10 hours. And many people think, oh my God, David, 10 hours, is it that far? No, it's not that far, but it takes 10 hours because we make a lot of stops along the way. And one of the most important stops we make along the way is this small little Inca village of Rachi, where we are able to see a very unique engineering in the construction of what is the main temple dedicated to Huiracocha. I know that in the picture it looks like a colonial structure, but let me tell you that it's an original Inca structure from the 1400s, which foundations were designed and built in volcanic stones, and the other 2/3 in mud bricks that sometimes they mix it up with human hair or animal fur to be more compacted and obviously last longer in time. And it will prove it more than 600 years. Now, after we continue with these first stops, for archaeological visits, we get to the highest point of the roads. And this place is called La Raya, which literally is the borderline in between two states in the southern part of Peru, Cusco and Puno. But La Raya is also important because it's the watershed in the southern part of the country, which means that all the water that flows from La Raya to Puno, it goes into the Titicaca Lake, which is a continental lake, which means it doesn't have connection with any ocean, right? And the water that flows in the opposite direction flows into the Amazon River and therefore the Atlantic Ocean. So look at this aerial picture of the lake. It looks tiny, but let me tell you that it's one of those huge lakes, not as big as the Great Lakes in the US, but it's huge. Just let me tell you that 1% of the lake, which is the Bay of Puno, it's where the most important city of this state sits. 1%. Can you imagine, what else is out there in the open lake? So it's just amazing. Now, it's amazing as well because on our tours, you are able to stop by these unique people, which are Los Uros, which is people from pre-Inca times that speak a different language than anybody else in the mountains. They speak Aymara, which is a language that comes from pre-Inca times. And they have learned, Claudia, to survive from wars or from any problem in mainland in floating islands. Can you believe that? Just imagine that those reed canoes that you see by the right side, they were the first idea of pontoons. They have to build these floating, islands. They build their homes over, these canoes, but little by little, they have learned that they could use the totora reeds, to build the islands. And so they started using the roots of the reeds to create these artificial pontoons where they settle down, their homes. Each of those huts belong to a family, right? So in that island, for example, we have like 6 families, but they are all relatives. So they live in extended family, and there are close to 300 of those floating islands in the community. Now, definitely another place that we also include in our tours are some natural islands. And in this case, we're seeing a picture of Taquile. And Taquile is so interesting because it seems that South America lives in the world of machos, it's always, that men don't do much things. But in this community, for example, men are expert kneaders, and they prove their skills, learning the knitting since 6 years old till 15 years old when they are tested by the community. If they fail the test, they cannot be considered as grown men, right? And what's the test? The test is, for example, you see the hat they wear. So they have to knit their own hat, and they have to be able to grab water in the hat, and the water has to stay in the hat for like 10 seconds. If the water starts dripping before 10 seconds, that means that that man is not a skillful knitter and is not considered as an adult in the community. So just imagine, things like that in the 21st century. But that's what makes very special the visit of Taquile too.
Oh, David, that sounds like so much pressure. But now we are headed to the Sacred Valley. Now, the Sacred Valley of the Incas envelops a fertile agricultural and cultural landscape punctuated by small villages of Quechua-speaking communities and dotted with the surviving remains of great Inca family estates. David, what can we expect to see and experience in the Sacred Valley?
Well, Claudia, the Sacred Valley is called like that because even nowadays it's considered a holy place for the people who lives there. It's the most important and most beautiful agricultural area in Cusco. And the picture you're seeing, it belongs to an archaeological site that goes by the name of Ollantaytambo, which is by historians the second most important Inca city after Cusco in this region. It's the gateway from the mountains to get into the Amazon rainforest. And actually, this is the place from where we get our trains to travel to Machu Picchu. No? On the excursions, we go uphill, you see the staircase to be able to see this amazing construction that they perform around the 1500s. And unfortunately uncompleted because of the arrival of the conquistadors. But look at, for example, just reminding a little bit the first question. So this is a picture on the rainy time. So don't you think that even on the rainy time, you could get great photographs of these sites? So as I said, anytime is a good time to come.
Wonderful. David, now before we continue, we have two questions about high altitude, actually. The first one is from Christy, and Christy's asking, what training do you recommend for walking, hiking in high altitude? And then the second one is from Juliet, and Juliet is asking, how common is elevation sickness?
Well, first of all, that we don't recommend any particular training because we are not going to do any hard physical activity. I think that as long as you keep a certain mobility at home, if you like to do walks, try to do maybe 2 or 3 times a week walk. That kind of gives you a little bit of a training, for coming up to the altitude. And about the asthma, we look, I'm working on tourism for like 17 years. I had various times people with asthma that feel even more comfortable in the altitude than at sea level. And this is because our environment is dry. And for them, it's much easier to breathe, this kind of dry air instead of very humid, air. And what was the second question? Sorry, what was?
Yes, Juliet is wondering, how common is elevation sickness?
How common is the altitude sickness? The most common symptom of altitude sickness is the headaches, but this is normal. Even for us, if we move away from the altitude for more than a month and we come back, we feel light headaches, which is normal. Yeah, but most of the time it's a mental, issue than a physical thing, right? So don't overthink much about the altitude sickness and you will be all right.
All right, perfect. Let's continue.
Wow, look at that picture. That's another beautiful site in the Sacred Valley. It's a very colonial town that goes by the name of Pisac that has one of the most colorful and important handicraft markets in the whole country. Just walking around the cobblestone streets, you're not just, aim to buy things. Even if you like just photography, you can just walk in these alleys, get some nice photos. Or even if you don't want to do that, you can sit by the main square in one of the coffee places and enjoy a fresh, hot coffee, meanwhile you're enjoying the views. So it's the kind of town, like, for example, if you want to buy small souvenirs or big souvenirs or fancy clothing to just very little trinkets, you are able to find almost anything, right? So I recommend always to have both currencies, dollars and soles, because sometimes it's better to pay in dollars and sometimes it's better to pay in the local currency. And most of the people there nowadays take credit cards. As they say, we speak different languages, which means that we take American Express, Visa, MasterCard, or any other, currency. So definitely the place where you should stop by to buy some souvenirs, to take home, right? Um, Also, something interesting about the town are the colonial ovens. These are places or homes where the ovens were built around the late 1700s and early 1800s, where you could find these pictures, with guinea pigs. And this is a warning alert for those of you that are sensitive, because in Peru, we don't consider the guinea pigs as pets. Actually, the guinea pig is one of the main delicacies in the local gastronomy. So we keep the guinea pigs at the ovens because we cook them, you know, as as one of our important meals. So I really hope that this kid does not feel disappointed because of that explanation. But
I
that's the
know
truth.
this is actually my brother when I went with my family in 2016, and he's an animal lover through and through. And, he took a photo thinking that, they're pets. And then when he found out what they're
But
actually meant for,
Claudia, we are also animal lovers, especially if they're tasty.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's continue.
Now, one of the things that definitely makes us a unique company is that we go to places that not many people go. Like, for example, this community that it's called Mullacas Misminay is a community on the, uh, I would say it's like a plateau over the Sacred Valley. And Go Ahead with a local partner have been developing a project of social help to the community of Misminay for the last 10 years, promoting the tourism for this community. And since the men used to work on the Inca Trail as porters, but nowadays they're open their homes to visitors to show, how they live. And it's amazing, Claudia, because they show us how they do the weaving, what kind of plants they use for dyeing the wool, what is the meaning of their outfits and what of their symbols maybe. And also we share time with the men, showing us agricultural activities and stories and everything. And also we take lunch here because we share with these people what is their main production. So it's just an amazing opportunity to interact. Oh my God. And of course, also when you are by the Sacred Valley, you can try the Chicha Dejora. That's how we call this fermented drink made out of corn, which is kind of like a beer because it gets some percentage of alcohol, not too much, but it used to be a drink prepared only for rituals, but nowadays is more like a social drink. It's a little bit bitter, and the reason why the second drink you have on the screen, it's the most popular amongst visitors and women. This is called Frutillada, and it's the same yellow chicha you saw before, but it's mixed with the strawberry juice and a little bit of sugar. And so it's a little bit sweeter and it tastes better than, the chicha de jora, no? Now, besides of all these experiences, we also do little hikes, as you see, nothing complicated. And this little hike from the community of Misminay takes us to this other amazing site called Moray, which, by the way, is not a platform for UFO, landings, because that's what people think it is. This is a laboratory of acclimatization and domestication of plants to different environments. Put it on this way. Every single platform you're seeing there has its own microclimate, and the Incas develop, this set of terraces with different microclimates to be able to acclimatize plants from subtropical environments to highland environments. And in that way, by the 1400s, they could stop the starvation in South America, which was actually one of the greatest achievements of this civilization in the 15th century. And of course, we cannot forget this other interesting site, which is Maras. It's also known as the salt mines of Cusco, but we are not mining the salt there. We are just trying to get the salt from a natural spring of salty water. And many people ask me, David, but how is that, salty water can come out from a mountain? Let me tell you, that's my same question. And so far, nobody can answer it. But this is a spring that comes from centuries, because there are evidences that it has been used from the year 200 after Christ till nowadays to get the salt in the same way. These are ponds with very shallow water that people just wait till the evaporation in the winter time create the crystals of salt in different layers into these ponds. And it's amazing because this is one of the places in the earth where you can get pink salt, right? So it's definitely a must in your list.
All right, well, another Peruvian mystery waiting to be solved. Now, let's continue our journey through Peru. Next up is the Amazon rainforest. David, what can you tell us about the Amazon, and what kind of animals can we expect to see here?
Well, in a difference of Iquitos, which is also part of the Amazon, Puerto Maldonado, which is this part of the Amazon rainforest, is different because most of the people that live there, it came originally from the mountains and got used to the jungle, which means that they don't get much of the resources of the jungle. And that's how the animals feel more comfortable living closer to them. On our hikes, we're able to find beautiful birds like toucans, as you see there, or probably the macaws, that you can easily find them on animal pet shops, but here you can find them on the natural habitats in these clay lakes where they used to have a breakfast, as we said, they used to eat, this very highly mineral contained clay for helping their digestion of different sorts of fruits they eat on the canopy of the trees, But you don't have to go far away to find animals. Even around our lodges, we can find, for example, the howler monkeys, which are very cheeky monkeys that you got to be careful, especially if you have some items with you. They love to approach. They're very, friendly, but sometimes they could be nasty too, right? Now, getting deeper into the Amazon rainforest, you can also spot the beautiful jaguars, or otorongos as we call. But you need to be with experts, and that's exactly what we do. We normally use lodges where we have biologists and naturalists, experts in the Amazon rainforest that lead our excursions into the forest. Yeah, and we do night tours as well. We go for caimans, we go for capybaras, which are these animals you see here. I know that they look like a giant guinea pigs, but they're rodents, by the way, and are considered actually the biggest rodents in the world, right? But, oh my God, these are also other kind of beautiful animals. The cochas, which are like little lakes that used to be part of the big rivers, nowadays are habitat for these beautiful giant river otters that they found in these lakes, a very nice habitat where they can survive fishing away from, predators, like the anacondas, which are the main predators. And finally, this beautiful friend here, the sloths. You got to be very patient to see these animals, because as sloths, of course, they don't have very high activity during the day. They normally do it on the evening, and they're kind of just chilling, in the trees. But this is a three-toed sloth. And we also can find it two-toed sloths in the Amazon rainforest.
Well, that is one happy sloth, David. Happy to be in the Amazon,
Yes, it is.
like our travelers when they visit. Now, let's switch things up a bit and get a little more cosmopolitan. Let's head over to Lima. Now, known as the city of kings, Lima has plenty to offer to satisfy the keen traveler's appetite. Whether it's the world-class food, nightlife, colonial style architecture, or surfing, this Peruvian gem really does provide something for everybody. David, why did Lima make our top places to visit list?
Well, Lima is our capital city, and it hosts 1/3 of our population, over 11 million people. And when you think about fusion cuisine, so definitely Lima is the best place. No, just imagine any kind of fusion cuisine. So there is a restaurant of that in Lima, and also there is a very nice contrast in what is the colonial park in the center of Lima with this newer, suburbs of the city by the coastal line. And let me tell you that also Lima is the only capital city in South America that sits by the coast, and that's something that makes it also very unique.
All right, David. Now, before continuing, we have a very important question from Don. And Don is wondering, where can they get the best ceviche?
Don, definitely Lima, right? And this is why. We have a cold water stream, or current that comes parallel to our coastal line from the Antarctic. So because of that fresh water, because of that cool water stream, the amazing diversity of fish we have in our sea is just mind-blowing. So you could have a ceviche of any kind of white flesh fish that you could imagine. So this is just a sample, but definitely Lima is the place for a good ceviche. And to accompany your ceviche, I'll recommend you to try this famous drink in the country, which is the Chicha Morada. It is not like the yellow chicha we saw on the Andes of Cusco, even though it's made with corn. This is more of a refreshment. No? So look at in the picture, we have a purple corn, looks almost black, but that corn has been boiling for hours, and during that process, we add some cinnamon, pineapple, lime juice, and by the very end, a little bit of sugar. And so it's very, very delicious. It maybe tastes like berries, like a kind of blueberries juice, but it's more refreshment, no, more refreshing than a juice. Now, this picture, it's of Lima's downtown. That's around the main square. The yellow building you see in the center is the city hall, and all the structures around belong to a time in Lima that belongs to the 17th century. So these are very ancient structures, and the building that you see to the right, that's the government palace. That's where the presidents of Peru have been living for over 200 years. Now, other squares that we have around the downtown Lima are, for example, this is the St. Martin Square, which is the place where the independence of Peru was proclaimed in the 1821. And something important about this square, besides obviously the statue, the sculpture in the center, is that one of the oldest hotels in downtown, it's located on the square. It's called the Bolivar Hotel, and it was the first place where the famous pisco sour was prepared for the first time ever. If you don't know what a pisco sour is, it's pretty much like a margarita, I will say, but with a local brandy made out of grapes, no, that goes by the name of pisco. So we used to say that one is not enough, but two are too much. So it could be dangerous, because it's a sweeter, temptation. And back in the downtown, we also see the Cathedral of Lima, which is one of the oldest churches in the city from the 1530s. But one of my favorites, I would say, is the St. Francis of Assisi Convent, right, in church. And why is that? Because this is the only place in Peru where you could walk into the catacombs. Yes, we take a tour into the catacombs where approximately 35,000 bodies were buried during the colonial times. It's not longer in use, but nowadays it's showcased as a museum visit, and it's just unbelievable what we can find there. The amazing amount of bones and skulls that you can find there. right? And speaking of pre-Inca societies, even on the most exclusive and expensive neighborhoods of Lima, you can, triple one of these pre-Inca pyramids. This is Huaca Guayamarca, and it's also one stop in our tours of the city of Lima. No, this belongs to a civilization from the early 300 after Christ, that built, these pyramids as temples, to not just offering things to their gods, also to bury, their priests and important people inside the pyramid, no, as the Egyptians did it as well thousands of years before.
All right, perfect. Now let's continue and let's talk about Cusco. So located in the middle of the Peruvian Andes is the ancient home of the Inca civilization Cusco. The city is famous for its spectacular main square, cobbled streets, and houses with terracotta tile roofs that will remind you of some ancient European villages. So David, can you tell us why Cusco is so special and what travelers can expect during a visit here?
Yes, of course. First of all, it's very special because it's my hometown. and because it's the kind of city where you can really breathe history. So every corner, every alley, it has something to say. But if you go a little bit on the outskirts of the city, during our tour of the city, we also stop by places like this. This is Pukapukara, which is an archaeological site that back in time was used as a checkpoint to control the access of people into the city of Cusco, right? Um, we also visit some other sites, right, in this upper part of the city, but definitely these are some of the most important ones.
All right, now we have a question from Magdalena, and she's wondering if travelers need or should get a prescription for the high altitude in Peru.
Normally, the visitors that come with some kind of medical prescriptions is because they have pre-existing medical conditions. Once here, we normally don't recommend any medication because we don't know how altitude can react. Sometimes there are side effects. That's why we don't use any medication at all, or we don't recommend any at all. We just encourage you to follow simple recommendations as proper breathing, um, a lot of water, resting and things like that. That, as I said before, try to keep you busy, and not thinking about the altitude, which is one of the main reasons why people feel the altitude, no, because it's more a psychological thing. Wow. Speaking of those other places that we have on the hills of Cusco, this is Kenko, and it's a natural formation of rocks of limestone where the Incas created these beautiful stone tables to perform, according to the archaeologists, the different processes or stages of mummification of their deads, no, preparing them for the afterlife. They always look for these kind of places because they're very cold and very dry, and as fridges, they could preserve bodies there for maybe 4 to 6 months, which is, the time recommended by archaeologists that last the mummification in this case. Right, and or just simply walking around, these sites, you can find families dressed up on the traditional way. This, for example, is a family that comes from a community over 15,000 feet on the highlands of Cusco. And they're dressed up like that, not because of the tourists or because they want a picture from you. They dressed up like that because it's part of their daily life, and they show how proud they are, that even nowadays they can be still wearing, these outfits. Sacsayhuaman, or, for English-speaking people, much easier to remember as sexy woman, which is not the correct pronunciation, but it's one of the largest, archaeological sites we have in the surroundings of Cusco. It used to be considered as a fortress by the conquistadors, but lately, with the archaeological excavations, it seems that it was more a religious site due to the style of engineering that was used for the construction of its walls. This is the place where you also get very amazed about what the Incas could do, because we have stones from 20 tons, which are the smallest, to 140 tons, which are the largest and heaviest. So it's just crazy, The Crista Blanco is a statue of Jesus Christ that was a gift to the city in 1945, and it's located on a hill that used to be considered important for the Incas back in time. But the statue was built there because, as you see, overlooks the older part of the city, and in a sort of way, we believe that protects us. That's why he has the wide open arms to kind of hug and protect the city. On our tours, we also stop by, of course, the main church of the city, which is the Cathedral of Cusco. It's a church that was built around the 1560s until the 1654. And it's considered as one of the richest churches in the world, and not just because of the architecture or maybe, the jewelry. It's also important because of the collection of paintings we have on its walls. Is the largest collection of paintings from a school of art created in the 1600s that got the name of the Cusco Art School. And for example, on the screen, you're seeing a picture, which is one of the most populars, which is the first attempt of replica of the Leonardo da Vinci's fresco of the Last Supper. But in this case, it was made by a local artist called Marco Zapaca, and he decided to include it in the picture, the roasted guinea pig, as the main course of the Last Supper. That also makes it, very unique. And finally, in downtown, we also stop in the Coricancha, or the Santo Domingo Convent. This was the most important religious structure for the Inca civilization by the 1400s. This is where they monopolized the religion in South America, that during the colonial times was taken over by the Dominican Church, and they built a convent right above the Inca remains. But also underneath the Inca remains, we can also appreciate pre-Inca remains. So it's just layers of history. And of course, we have to always talk about food. So if you have free time on the evening, just walking around streets, you can find the anticuchos, which are skewers made out of beef heart, or in some Catholic celebrations, you can find traditional meals like the one you're seeing, which is the chiriuchu, which is basically, a dish that has a lot of ingredients, especially the guinea pig, but it has chicken, it has sausages, it has tortilla, cheese, chilies, etc., etc. So it's a huge plate, But something that I always recommend to my groups whenever they come to Cusco and have a spare time is to take the optional cooking classes. No, because they are not just able to learn a recipe of a traditional meal, they're also going to learn a lot about the products, where they come, the different diversity we have in the country, and of course, how to prepare these traditional meals. In this case, we have a lomo saltado in the picture, which is a beef salted with onions and tomatoes.
Yes, I would definitely recommend the cooking class to all the foodies watching. Now, moving on through this magical journey through Peru, of course, we have to finish with Machu Picchu. Now, the wonderful ruins of Machu Picchu are one of the best shows and attractions in Peru. I mean, just by looking at it, there's no doubt why it was classified as one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. So, David, of course, tell us why Machu Picchu is a cannot miss place to visit in Peru.
Look, Clara, it's the only place that in my life, whenever I go, it takes my breath away. I know that pictures can be gorgeous, but no picture makes justice of Machu Picchu. For local people, it's a city that dances over clouds, because as you see the mist on the picture, that kind of mist goes up and down all the time, no, and creates an air of mystery in the city. And despite what the Incas have done, the environment around Machu Picchu is unique, because this is what we call the cloud forest, or the beginning of the Amazon rainforest, which is still over mountains. Now, to be able to get to Machu Picchu, we take a train from Ollantaytambo in a trip of 1 hour and 30 minutes. For about 10 years ago to nowadays, is still considered as one of the most beautiful train rides in the world. And this is because, as you see, for example, the cars of the different companies, they have windows even on the top part of the car. So they allowed you to see almost 360 the environment around the trip to Machu Picchu. Yeah. And when we are in Machu Picchu, we always try to get to the like top part of the city for our classic pictures. With or without llama, pictures are gonna be just amazing. We have llamas. This is not just a propaganda. We have llamas in Machu Picchu, but there are more animals that we use to keep the grass low and in a way to ornate, no, the city, to give it a different air in your visit. They don't like to be pet, but they can be, in your photographs without problem.
Yes, now, David, on the topic of walking around Machu Picchu, we got a question from Katrina, and she's asking, how difficult is it walking around while visiting Machu Picchu, and what is the best time of the year to travel to Machu Picchu?
Well, Katrina, nowadays in Machu Picchu, we have different roads. Like if you are the kind of person that it's in like very good physical conditions, you can take one of the longest roads and discover the whole place, stopping in every single little corner of the site. If you're willing to walk more than 3 hours, of course. But if you're the kind of person that perhaps you have some kind of mobility issues and you just want to enjoy, absorb the energy of the site, we have shorter roads with very little steps, places to rest where you can just sit and relax. So either that you want to walk a lot or you just want to do pictures or just walk very little, we have options for any kind of taste, right? So the pictures that you're going to see next are pictures that give you an idea of pretty much how's the terrain in Machu Picchu, no? If we go to the upper part, we could have, grass and some stones. We can see, for example, these carvings in natural boulders in the mountain that were altars, to dedicate rituals to the mountain gods. Like if you move on to maybe the lower part of the city, you could find amazing structures like this, which is the main temple of Machu Picchu. That gives you a little bit an idea of the time of construction because it's similar to what you can find in Cusco, which is pretty much 15th century, or the Temple of the Sun, which is by far the finest structure in the city and a beautiful example of what is the organic engineering of the Incas. There you can see, for example, that the terrain is flat in most of the cases. No, look at that's the Three Windows Temple, which is also part of the main plaza of Machu Picchu. But I will say that you will have like ramps, stairs. So if you do a very slow pace, like we normally deliver our tours, you can easily cover the whole city. If it's not the longest, road, so you can also do the median road, which is, enough to see the whole site. Yeah. And then if you are the kind of person that like to investigate a little bit more, we have places like these, rooms where the Incas kept ornaments or all the paraphernalia, on the worshiping of the gods. If we move to the other side of the city, for example, we can find places like the Temple of the Condor, which is it's a temple where the Incas just took advantage of the natural boulders in the mountain to create, the wings of an stylized condor. No, so look at those two boulders are the wings, and in the ground we have a triangular stone, which one of its corners was carved with the shape of the head of the animal, and a wider stone as a collar around the neck. So they try to represent with the stones the shape of a condor, which is the largest, flying bird in the world, because this was a god for these people, that connect the universe with the earth. And these kind of amazing places can be easily found in Machu Picchu.
Yes, well, I cannot stress enough how breathtaking a trip to Machu Picchu can be. Thank you, David, for sharing your top places to visit in Peru. Now, before we get into our Q&A section, let's talk a little bit about how you at home can see all of these magnificent places on a trip with EF Go Ahead Tours. For those of you who are not familiar with our Peru itineraries, there are many ways you can travel to this beautiful country with us. We have around 4 different itineraries to Peru and counting, or tours that include Peru that cater to a wide range of interests. Now, for example, we have our grand tours where you can discover many places we just touched on all in one trip. If you're a foodie, I recommend our South American food and wine tour. If you want to celebrate a holiday in a different country, I recommend our New Year's Eve in Lima tour. And if you love adventure, then all of them would be great for you. David, can you walk us through quickly on a few of the itineraries that people can book at home?
Sure. We have the Grand Tour of Peru, which is actually the tour that includes all the places that we have been talking on this webinar. You start by Lima, and then you move on to Iquitos, Sacred Valley, Cusco, Machu Picchu, Lake Titicaca, and then back to Lima. But if you have some more days that you could use, you can add an extension of 4 days to Bolivia, which is also very interesting because that gives you an idea of how different could be neighbor countries in South America. Then we have the ancient Peru and Machu Picchu, which is, an 11 days tour that basically, focus the attention in the southern part of the country where we have the most important archaeological sites, but you can add a 3 days extension to the Amazon jungle, no? If you are the kind of person that because of your work cannot travel for many days, but you have a week off, let's say, so this is the perfect tour for you because it's a week in Peru, and you can do Lima, Cusco, Sacred Valley, and Machu Picchu in just one, short experience. But you can add, if you have some more days, an extension to Paracas, which is considered as the Galapagos of Peru. And finally, our grand tour of South America that includes 3 countries. You start in Brazil, discovering Rio, the Iguazu Falls, and then you move on to Buenos Aires, Argentina, a little bit about the wine and the food there, and then you fly in Peru to continue with the cultural experience in the southern part of the country.
All right. Thank you so much, David. For those of you watching, if you've never been on a group tour with us before, booking is very simple. You can call us at the number on the screen, or you can visit our website at goaheadtours.com to check out our over 190 tours that we offer around the world. And to those who were wondering, yes, we do offer a payment plan where you can customize your withdrawal date so you don't have to worry about paying for a tour all at once. Now, we have a few minutes left to take some live questions, so please write them on Zoom if you're with us on Zoom or in the comments section on Facebook. All right, let's see some of the questions that we got here. We have a question from Linda, and this goes back to the Amazon rainforest, David. Linda's wondering, what wildlife are we very likely to see?
If it's the Amazon rainforest of Puerto Maldonado, all kind of animals. Expect to see, as I said, caimans, monkeys, birds, river otters, anacondas, jaguars. So this is the place, if you're an animal lover and you really want to experience the jungle, this is the place you should go.
Perfect, thank you. And now a question from Isabel. Isabel is wondering, what is the best souvenir to bring back? Something that she can only find in Peru.
Well, something that comes only from Peru, it's definitely the baby alpaca clothing, right? If you find something more pricey and unique, the vicuña, okay, fiber clothing. So that's for sure an expensive, souvenir, but it's unique from this part of the world. But if you're looking for something little, there are lots of things that I could recommend you.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Now let's continue with some of the questions that we received here. Now, can you repeat again, how long is the train ride to Machu Picchu?
From Ollantaytambo to Machu Picchu is 1 hour and 30 minutes.
Okay, perfect. And then let's see here. This question is from Adrian, and they're wondering, what kind of things should tourists be aware of when they visit in order to remain safe?
What kind of things you should be aware of? You should be aware of to fall in love of the country. It's
great answer.
It's pretty safe. Wherever we go, we have choose the safest places. And let me tell you, and this is not because I'm from Cusco. Cusco is one of the safest cities in the country. So
Yes, when I was there in 2016 with my family, there was never a moment where I felt unsafe. All right, let's continue here. We have a question from Fridiash. They're wondering what clothing is needed for the grand tour in June.
Well, June in Peru is the winter time, which is actually unlike what everybody will think that maybe it's like snowy and things like that. No, it's the driest time of the year. We have the hottest temperatures in the morning and it gets chilly in the afternoon, but with a good warm jacket, it's enough.
Perfect. All right. Thank you. Now we have a question from Tori, and Tori is wondering what health requirements are needed for the Amazon, if any.
Where we go, we don't need actually, any health requirement, but just in case, most of our visitors got the yellow fever, vaccination. That's it. But no, it's not like a must or a requirement to go to the Amazon rainforest, but just in case, it's better to have it.
All right, awesome. And then last question is from Patricia. And Patricia is asking, is it worth doing the second day tour to Machu Picchu?
It's definitely worth it because you can include on that second day walk to Machu Picchu an optional hike. And that takes you up to the mountains that you normally see on the pictures on the background. So yes, for sure, a second day entry, it's more than worth it. Yeah.
Perfect. And then we have one more question. Are vegetarian meals, can they be provided on tour?
Yes, of course, of course. Actually, most of the restaurants we use are aware of nowadays, more people becoming vegetarian and even vegan, right? And so there's no issue at all in terms of food for vegetarians or even vegans in our tours.
Perfect. That's great. All right. Thank you so much, David, for taking the time to answer those questions. Now, if you enjoyed yourself today, like David and I certainly did, please mark your calendars for our upcoming travel talks. As you can see, we have a lot of holiday themed ones coming up. So you can sign up to any or all of them by going to goaheadtours.com/webinars. Now, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I will be receiving an email from us in the coming days with more tips and tricks and things to drink and eat in Peru. So keep an eye out for that email. And thank you, David, for taking the time to tell us all about Peru. Do you have any parting words for our audience watching?
No, it was my pleasure, and I'll be more than glad to be your host whenever you decide to come to Peru. So
yes.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be back on the road. It's been very hard for most of us, but I'm glad that now we are, recovering little by little. So I'll see you here. I won't say goodbye. I'll see just to see you later, as we say.
See you later. Yeah, thank you so much, David, and happy holidays, everybody. We'll see you next time.